My bad. We got something going on here. My bad. I got something going on here. What have I got going? My bad. Here we go. All right. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. I'm your host, Jeff Marlowe, and I'm also joined by our special guest today, Jared Morris from Assembly Call and Zion Brown from Inside the Hall. Today, we're discussing your Indiana Hoosiers' heartbreaking 86-85 loss to the number 6 Iowa Hawkeyes in Iowa City. This drops the women's record to 26-2 overall, snaps a 14-game winning streak, and now finishing 16-2 in the conference. But you're outright Big Ten champions and the number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament next week. But let's start this show the way we start every show, and that's with our banner moment. And I'm going to go to what I thought was going to be the winning moment. Mackenzie Holmes going to the free throw line with 1.5 seconds to go, hit 2 free throws, ice in her veins, and just didn't work out that way for her because the heroics of Caitlin Clark, as if we had to hear more about Caitlin Clark, was going to, unfortunately, did us in at the end. But I thought that I thought Mackenzie's free throws at the end were going to be the winning moment as well as the banner moment. And again, as our banner moment is sponsored by Home Field Apparel, Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that loves great collegiate gear. They are always refreshing current schools or coming out with new ones. So whether you want only IU gear or other college teams or nothing associated with a team, Home Field probably has something for you. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME, HOME, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's a promo code HOME for 15% off. Where, once again, the website is Home Field Apparel. Wear one for the team. All right, so we're going to go around the court here. We're going to swing it over to Jared for his musings about the game.
It was a fantastic basketball game, obviously. 2, really high-level teams, with a lot of competitive fire, 2 teams playing really hard. And so I think just as a basketball fan, it was really fun to watch. As an Indiana fan, it was infuriating to watch because ESPN just loves to ruin every good thing about sports. And look, Caitlin Clark is a really good player. I mean, she's a phenomenal talent, and watching her do things on the basketball court is really fun. I could do without some of the histrionics and some of the other stuff, and certainly the coverage makes her, kind of annoying in that way. But that's a great shot to hit, at the end of the game. And so I think, we'll probably talk about how Indiana defended it and maybe what could have been done different, but you have to tip your cap to her. I think there's 2 things that really stand out to me about this game. 3 things. 1, Indiana's still the outright Big Ten champs. So let's not lose sight of that. It's a disappointing result, and I think a surprising result because everybody who's watched this team all season long, I think, fully believed that they would find a way to win this game. And there they are with the lead with 1.5 seconds left, put themselves in a position to do it. But, I think falling behind early, Indiana dug themselves a little bit of a hole with that initial surge by Iowa where I think, they were up 13-2 or whatever it was. And Indiana was essentially 10 points better for the rest of the game. But, sometimes when you don't come out right off the bat in an environment like this, you can dig yourself a hole, and it kind of feels like you're playing catch-up the rest of the game. And it's like you climb the mountain and you get that lead, just like Indiana got that lead right before halftime, and then, Iowa gets it right back. And so it kind of felt like Iowa was in control for most of the game because they would push it out. But, to Indiana's credit, they just kept coming back. And outside of the way the game started, I don't look at this really as a game where, there's any glaring questions about Indiana or their readiness for the Big Ten tournament or anything. Honestly, I think Iowa shot better today. Indiana got a lot of good looks from deep, went 7 for 24, only 29%, and Iowa goes 39% from deep. And I honestly think that was, the big difference in the game. Is Indiana had some shots from outside that they normally hit that they just weren't able to knock down, which sometimes is going to happen, in an environment like that. And Iowa made them, to their credit. So, I don't walk away from this game feeling any less confident about this team's, readiness for the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament. It's just a tough loss to, a really good team in Iowa that was just able to make one more play at the end of the game.
Yeah, and even in an otherwise scenario where this game was going to be still had some bearing on conference standings, we knew this was going to be a tough environment to play in. And kudos to Coach Morin and the players because they just kept battling back. It would have been easy for them at some point, I think, to simply when it got to 7, 8 points to be like, not our day. We'll just kind of let it roll from here. But they kept battling back, and like we said, had a chance to win it. So let's swing it around to Zion and let's bring Zion in. Welcome Zion to doing the work for the first time. Zion coming in from inside the hall. But Zion, what do you think about the game today?
Yeah, first of all, just thank you for having me on. And like Jared said, I think the shooting difference made a big difference. And IU just was off on a lot of these shots. Sydney Parrish and Chloe Moore McNeil were really the only ones that were able to get their 3-point shots going. You saw Sarah Scalia and Yarden Garzone kind of try, and they were never able to fully catch a rhythm. So that was a big part of this game that I think if it's at IU, which we saw a few weeks ago, or even in a neutral site, which me and Jared were talking before we went live, we could see in a week, I think that's a little bit different. And so that to me played a huge part in this game. But then also looking at it, closing quarters is what killed IU ultimately in this game. Caitlin Clark hit a shot or a free throw with under 5 seconds left at the end of all 4 quarters. That kind of just gave Iowa a little more momentum going into the next quarter. And then, of course, the end of the game, all zeros on the clock. She hits the buzzer-beating 3. So she had 9 of her 34 points came at the end of the 4 quarters. That was a big thing for me that stood out, that Indiana could not just get that one stop at any point of the game when they needed to shut Clark down and kind of keep that momentum. They let her get going and get a shot right as the buzzer sounded or right as the buzzer was about to sound in each quarter.
Yeah, that's excellent point there, Zion, because that's something we used to talk about with our program quite a bit. What kind of how you ended quarters. You always wanted to try and be in a positive aspect with that, and obviously today Iowa was. I want to go back real quick, Jared. I'll kind of swing it to you first, but just talk about though. You mentioned it in your opening, just the team's mental toughness because they just kept, like we've already said, they kept battling back, but you never really saw them get, like anything got under their skin. Their facial expressions never changed. They just kept, it was like, Terry Moore says, do the work. But just give me what your thoughts about watching the team today on the road, tough environment, and how they just kind of kept battling it all through the game.
They're just unflappable. And they just have such a confidence in themselves and a confidence in each other. That is really special. You don't see that often with teams. And when you have it, it's so noticeable, and that's what I saw is every time they got down, there was I think it might've been in the 4th quarter or it was sometime in the second half, and Sydney Parrish, who I thought just really made so many big plays at big moments for Indiana. And she had the one really bad pass where she tried to throw it cross court, Iowa steals it. They go down on the other end, but then she came right back down and made a 3-pointer. It's a lot like what we see from Jalen Hood-Schifino, right? And on the men's side in the Illinois game where he, makes a bad pass and it's like it doesn't bother him. And it's like the women are just a team full of that. I think Chloe had a play like that too, where she made a mistake on defense. I think it was 76-70, and she just comes right down and drives in the lane and makes a bucket to make it 76-72. And so that's the thing with this team, and that's why it's so easy to believe in them and have confidence in them because, they don't get rattled. And, it's almost like if they make a mistake, they're more motivated to make a play and more confident that they're going to make the play. So, I thought, again, they missed some shots. They had maybe a few uncharacteristic turnovers, although they only turned the ball over 8 times, and I think defensively they were leakier today than normal, and we can talk about that. And I was going to do that to you some because they have some really good, defensive players. But like Zion said, at really key moments, they just weren't able to get the stops. Some of that was Iowa has really talented players that made big plays in the moment. Some of that was, as we all know, there's officiating on both sides in a women's game that is going to make you tear your hair out. And so that was certainly part of it too. But I think probably, when they watch this game and they try to look at, okay, what can we learn from this to get better going into the tournament? It just felt like there were a few defensive possessions where they were disconnected. They showed a highlight of the one play where really, and you guys will know this, better because, Coach Marlowe, you've analyzed every second of this team this year, but it really looked like Grace got caught, trying to help in the lane. And, I was able to just swing it over for a wide open 3-point shot. And it seemed like she was maybe, a step and a half, too far into the lane that she didn't need to be there. And you saw that a lot where Iowa was then able to swing the ball back around on the other side and get threes. So it felt like the attention to detail defensively wasn't quite there. But, when plays needed to be made and you get down and Iowa's going on a little bit of a run, there's that mental toughness there that it's just, you knew Iowa was going to never run away with the game. And unfortunately, just some of that attention to detail defensively, as Zion said, especially late in quarters, really, I think just caught up with them. It was just, a little bit too much to overcome. But all that said, it still took a crazy last-second shot to beat them. So, this is a great team, one of the best Indiana basketball teams I've ever watched. And, today doesn't change that. But I think it does probably give them a few things to kind of work on, and maybe it refocuses them. Not that they weren't focused, but, when you've been winning, now you take a loss, maybe there's something there that Terry Morin can use to even squeeze a little bit more focus, out of them. And goodness gracious, if they can become even a little bit more focused, they'll be even more ready for tournament play.
And Zion, I want to throw it over to you for a kind of a question. Last 4.5 seconds, I really expected kind of Grace Berger time. And to a certain degree it was, because Grace was the inbounder. But were you a little surprised, not that Mac wasn't going to make a good play, but I was a little surprised they maybe didn't try and get it to Grace and go downhill a little bit. But again, hard to argue with the play they got. But also I want to ask you what you thought on that last play with Caitlin Clark. Thought Chloe kind of got caught up on the screen. Were you a little surprised there maybe that they didn't flat out just double Caitlin Clark wherever she went on that screen, on that action coming out of the timeout?
Yeah, so I'll start with when Indiana got the ball. Like you said, they threw it in to Mackenzie Holmes, and I expected it to be a Berger Holmes pick and roll rather than what they did. But I do understand the logic behind that. I think you can kind of catch a team off guard if you just throw it straight into the post on an inbound versus if you inbound the ball, then you kind of have Holmes setting up. So she got pretty good positioning, which is why Sonano ended up fouling on that play. Now, she traveled. I'm going to say that should have been called for a travel, and it wasn't on Mackenzie Holmes, but it was definitely a foul on Sonano if you're not going to call it travel. So I understood why they did that, and it ended up in 2 IU points. On the other end, that play is going to be controversial as far as how Indiana guarded it. And what happened was, I'm not sure if either of you guys kept the TV on long enough to hear Clark talk about the play with Holly Rowe after the game courtside. But basically, Clark made a good point. The point I was going to make is that if that ball wasn't going to Clark, they're looping it into the paint to Sonano, who's cutting in. So that's why Indiana didn't have 2 on Clark on that play. If you look at the play, Yarden Garzone was just kind of standing in the lane, waiting for a potential pass that was going to try to go over her head. And so that's what freed up Caitlin Clark off those screens. And Jeff, you nailed it. Chloe Moore McNeil got caught up on those screens. I thought Mackenzie Holmes should have helped off. She was guarding the screener, Sonano. I thought Mackenzie Holmes should have helped up and kind of got into the face, even if she got right back to Sonano. If she could have just, for half a second, kind of just showed herself in front of Caitlin Clark instead of what happened where Clark just caught the ball and all she saw was the basket. I think that small play where Holmes just kind of stays stationary and is sticking to Sonano made all the difference to me on that last buzzer-beating shot. And then, of course, it's still just a tremendous shot. It was fading away, leaning away for Clark. But she said it. She practices that shot. They practiced that play. And she said, we know that teams are going to have to make a decision to either trap me or protect the paint on that play. And IU chose to protect the paint, and Clark made the play.
Yeah, and what it reminded me of a little bit, I'll show my age here a little bit. It really kind of is even more of the gut punch. It reminded me of the old Reggie Miller play against the Bulls back in the 1990s.
That is a great. That's what it is. You're right. I know I've seen that play. That is that play. You're right.
Except so yeah. And I'm not again when we're 26-2, I know we're probably sounding like we're nitpicking here, but those were probably that was probably obviously at the end of a game like that, that's the one everybody focuses on. But so let's move on and let's go into what we call on here on the doing the work as the as expected. And in a lot of times, these are the things that we just things that you've come to expect from this team. And I'll start it out with Jared first, and just things that you saw today that you're like, yep, that's IU women's basketball.
Well, some of it is what I already said, which is, whenever the other team makes a run or seems like they might seize control of the game, this team always makes plays. And so, I thought, to me, what I really liked to see is there was a stretch there where Indiana was taking a lot of threes and missing them, in the second half. And they really, I think it was there toward the end of the third quarter, is that it was almost like they just said, enough of this, let's attack the basket. And Grace got in the lane and scored. I think Sydney Parrish had a great drive and scored. They started getting the ball to Mackenzie Holmes. And so, to me, what's as expected is, while Iowa is so dominant really with two players, and they had a couple other people step up, what we saw again today from Indiana is the balanced scoring. And again, if Yarden's able to make some of the threes that she typically makes, if Sarah's able to make some of those shots, that scoring is even more balanced. But I thought that's what makes Indiana so hard to guard is Chloe can step out and make a three, and Chloe can take you to the basket. Grace is just absolutely money from the mid range, but she also makes some of the best pocket passes that you're ever going to see, on those pick and rolls with Mackenzie. And so, that's the thing to me is just offensively, this team has so many different ways to beat you. And unfortunately, one of those ways that has been reliable this year, which is the 3-point shooting, kind of went away from them a little bit today. But, everything else was there, and they were able to make adjustments. And I think to Iowa's credit, they came out, I think, at the start of the fourth quarter playing zone, which, kind of made Indiana go away a little bit from what they had been doing, and they had to adjust back. So I thought some of the coaching, back and forth was really interesting to watch. But, this team, it has a chance to go far in the NCAA tournament because they have so much scoring balance, and they have different ways to beat you based on what the game calls for. And again, for 39 minutes, and 58.5 seconds, they did everything to earn another one of those wins. So, just offensively, it's just such a versatile team. And they're always going to have that to lean on as they go forward.
Zion, we'll throw it over to you. What do you kind of just expect, what did you see today that you're just like, yep, that's the IU women's basketball team?
I got to go with Mackenzie Holmes for my as expected. I mean, they threw all those different looks at her like Jared just talked about, and she still finishes with 21 points on 8 of 10 shooting. It was just almost like easy for her against this Iowa defense. She did have 4 turnovers, which part of those were because of that trap and all those different looks they threw at her. But overall, she was still able to get to her spots and score when she needed to. She passed at the right times, and sometimes it led to points. Sometimes Indiana just couldn't make the shots. But Mackenzie Holmes playing the way she did today and the way she has now for multiple years at this point, that's the as expected. She was really phenomenal offensively in this game. It wasn't loud as sometimes it is. It's usually louder than it was as far as just her dominating time after time. But when she got the ball and she realized she had a scoring opportunity, she took it and she did not let the team down.
Let me ask you guys, because the one thing that I was thinking watching the game is, can we get it to her more? I mean, she's such a good player, and she only took 10 shots. I mean, she was 4th on the team in shots. And look, Iowa's got a great defender on her, and they tried to do a lot of things to not let her get the ball. But it felt to me at times like Indiana wasn't quite insistent enough on getting her involved in certain possessions. I'm curious if you guys had the same feeling, or if you just thought that was Indiana doing a nice job of taking what the defense was giving them based on how Iowa was guarding them.
Zion, I'll let you take that one first.
I'll start. I say sometimes they can get it to her more. There were a few possessions where I felt like they would race up the court. She would post early, and they didn't find her in time, and then Iowa would set up their defense, and the whole play would kind of change. So I think the pace was a big thing. Iowa plays with insane pace, one of the fastest teams in the country. And Indiana responded to that, but at times I thought they could have got her more quick looks. But in general, the thing about Mackenzie Holmes, I think they know that she's not going to force the shots. So they'd rather try to get her quick looks. And if not, then they like to set up a pick and roll or something else for somebody else. So she should probably shoot more than 10, I'd say. But I don't know if there were too many more opportunities throughout the game for her to get looks off.
I thought a lot of it came in the first half, Jared, and that was a really good point that I was going to talk about a little bit later as well. But it was just like they came with a really hard double early as soon as Mackenzie caught it in that first half. And I'm not sure they were ready for that. And I know we prepare, and I give props to Coach Moore, but we just looked like we struggled to get it out of the double team. Mackenzie was a little slow making decisions. She either needed to make a quicker move or pass it quicker out of the double team. So I think that threw them off through a big part of the first half. I thought they made a nice adjustment going into the second half, where I thought they were a little better at getting Mackenzie the ball. As we said, she had 10, she only ended up with 10 shots, but she also got to the line for 6 free throws. So, and that was going to be my expected. I really felt, again, that's the one thing I've come to really expect from this program is Coach Moore and the staff makes really good adjustments at halftime. And I thought they did again today. Now, we're going to talk about in the next segment because I think they just really struggled on the defensive end. And that's one thing I'll come back to in the next segment because they, as Jared mentioned earlier, we just never really got on the same page. And a lot of that is Iowa. A lot of that's Caitlin Clark. A lot of that is Warnock and Martin and Marshall, who were able to knock down threes. But we just really seemed at times not sure what we were doing in terms of who to match up with or where we were supposed to be in the help. And so that was one of those that we just never could seem to get quite adjusted on that. But I thought offensively we made some really nice adjustments. And I thought Iowa going zone might have been the best thing to help us because I thought it allowed us to maybe, get a little better look in terms of what they were doing. I think we had a little bit of, at times we were really struggling to figure out what they were doing in their man-to-man. And we were able to kind of get settled in there. So I made that comment to a friend of mine on our text message. I'm like, best thing that happened to our offense was them went zone. But we'll go for, and so that was, I just, again, felt like the adjustments they made, especially on the offensive end today, were really good. So let's go on to the next segment then. And we may all have kind of the same thing. But Zion, I'll throw it to you here first. Any surprises today about this team? And again, when you're 26-2, they're, maybe nitpicking, but with something today that you're like, wow, that just wasn't normal.
Yeah, I think we might all end up with the same thing. It has to be the shooting, specifically from Garzone and from Sarah Skaya. Those two combining from beyond the arc to go 2 of 10 on their 3-point shots. It's not something you see from them every day. They had good looks as well. Both of them did, and they just could not knock them down. Once again, I don't foresee that being an issue with this team. They've shot so well all season long, and Garzone is one of the best shooters in the entire country right now, percentage-wise, and she just wasn't able to get them to fall. So the lack of 3-point shooting that went down tonight for Indiana, that is the big surprise to me.
Jared?
Yeah,
Jared,
I'll add to that, and this is going to be unfair because this is essentially holding one of the all-time greats to almost an unfair standard. But I was surprised that Grace had that turnover late and missed that shot because I've just come to expect her to always come through. And so again, I mean, this is almost just praising her for how wonderful of a player she is by saying that this was surprising. She only had one turnover, but kind of had that play where she was trying to drive baseline and just lost the ball. I mean, you could see, she slammed the ground afterwards. She was frustrated with herself. And then, she and Caitlin Clark kind of had that back and forth where Clark had one rim out. She had one rim out. But I always think she's going to make a play in a big spot, and so to see her just come up a little short on those possessions, which I can guarantee you wherever she's at right now, she's, probably kicking herself and going through those plays in her mind because that's the kind of competitor she is. That's really it. I mean, I think, that's really the only surprise. And again, all of that stuff happened, and Indiana still led by 2 with 1.5 seconds left. So it's one of those things like, we can analyze it and you can nitpick some of those things. But in most cases, when you don't have just a remarkable player like Clark on the other side who can make a shot like this, we're walking away with a 2-point win, talking about this team's grit and how they were able to win, how they were able to overcome some of the shooting woes and overcome all these mistakes. And so one shot kind of colors the entire view of all these plays. But, when you lose, then you start thinking about every single possession that could have gone differently where, hey, maybe if you're up 4 instead of 2, then that shot can't even go in. And that's it to me, just because Grace has just put herself into that rarefied air where you're shocked when she doesn't make the play late in the game. And there were a couple there that I'm sure she'd like to have back.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the defense a little bit here. Just the fact that it's just surprising that they really struggle. And again, Iowa, a very good offensive team, but just really struggled at times to make adjustments. I felt like when Clark got going downhill, I really felt like they needed to try and maybe force her back to her left hand. I mean, I know that she may still be able to do the same thing, but she got to that point where she had like 4 or 5 straight possessions where she drove with that right hand, either got a bucket for herself or a dish off for somebody else, like Sanano to get a bucket at the rim or a kick out for a 3. And I would have just liked to have seen us force her back to the left. And see if we got something going that way. But that just was the defensively. We allowed them. I shouldn't say allowed them. They, again, good team, 51% from 52% from the field for Iowa today. And this is a team that prides itself on defensively not allowing teams to shoot that well from the field. So again, defensively, I thought that was a big part of the surprise for me. Now, rebounding wise, we held them to 3 offensive rebounds. So we actually won the battle on the glass. which would have been a concern of mine going in. But it's just one of those where I just think you go back every possession defensively. I'm thinking about what we could have done a little differently. How could we have gotten out a little quicker? And you talk about Grace's shot. That thing was down. I don't know how that thing didn't go in. So, but that was my
Let me ask you guys this. Are you surprised that Indiana did not have Mackenzie Holmes miss the second free throw? Because if she misses it, now Iowa, and I guess part of that is probably going to be, how much time is on the clock, because originally it was 0.8, then they made it 1.5. What would you have done in that case?
I understand why you just have her make both because then a two can't be in that scenario. But what ended up happening was they made both in a three in that case. But even if you miss the second one, Iowa rebounds and probably calls a timeout still with about 1 or 1.1 left on the clock. So it wouldn't have made much of a difference. I don't think. I think Clark still gets that shot off in time for 3. So I think you just make that free throw and trust your defense.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah,
I agree with Zion, and I'm not a fan of missing. I'm not a fan of missing at any point. I mean, it'd been different. They'd been out of timeouts, but when you've got a timeout and in the women's game where you can advance it, I just don't like missing there. From that standpoint. But I know I already saw that discussion on Twitter. I think there was some discussion of that in the Workaholics here about the strategy. I'm just not a fan of missing on purpose in that situation. Now, in the men's game, where you would have still had to go 84 feet, I'd miss it because now you got to try and do something length of the floor. But that's a different to me the strategy, and that's one of those that for people who haven't watched a lot of the women's game, that's where the strategy really does get different from the men's game because the ability to advance the ball on the timeout after in that last minute of the game there. And I think that really helps that from a standpoint. It bit us today, but I like the fact that you can do that. I'm a big fan of that in the coaching business, and I wish the men would finally follow through on that as well. And you guys have anything else, surprises I want to talk about here, or we'll move on and talk about the numbers?
I mean, I'm just surprised they lost. I mean, ultimately, the way this team has played, and I think it's interesting because on the one hand, as I said earlier, okay, so you lose this game, you've been on this winning streak, now you lose this game, does that give you a chance to kind of refocus or, give the coaching staff some different kind of ammunition to use as you go into the tournament? And I guess as I've thought about that since I said it, maybe you would make that argument if this is a team that had kind of been struggling and just kind of eking by with wins and not really playing well. But this team's been playing really well. And so I'm actually not sure that I buy the argument that I made earlier, that it can be twisted into a positive, because at the end of the day, what you don't want to have happen now for a team that has won so many games is for any little bit of doubt to creep in. Right. And there shouldn't be doubt because they played well enough to win this game. They just got beaten, by a last second shot. And so, but I'm not too worried about that because I think this team has shown enough just mental toughness. They're so skilled and they can do so many things, that I don't think it's going to, harm them. I just think, look, at the end of the day, it's a loss. I think they'll put it behind them and just move on. I don't think there's really any real reasonable way to spin it positively or negatively. It's just a loss, but this team has shown us enough mental toughness that I think they'll just be able to power right through it and come out and continue playing the same way they've been playing in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah. Bob Knight was one that always said there wasn't much to be gained from a loss. He never felt that, people would always say, oh, you can get something from a loss. Bob Knight never felt that way. And I hate to disagree with an all-time great, if not the greatest coach of all time in the sport, but I do think there's some times I think the learning thing today will be how you cover that last play. If you get in that situation again, how do you cover that last play? I think that will be possibly the learning moment. So let's move on inside the numbers. And Jared, I know you're a little bit on limit on time. I'll let you go first. Were there any numbers that jumped out to you? You've mentioned a couple already, but anything else?
Well, I think the free throw shooting is impressive, 16 of 17, and Mac hits those 2 at the end, So, this wasn't – Indiana didn't make their threes, but it wasn't a case of them just kind of coming in and not being mentally ready for the game, because if that was the case, they wouldn't have made 16 of 17 from the free throw line. And we talk about this a lot on the assembly call because I always go back to, my high school basketball coach who used to tell me, and my game was all about shooting. He's like, there's a difference between shooting well and playing well. You can play really well and you just miss shots that day, and it happens. And so, when I look at those two numbers, 7 of 24 from 3, but 16 of 17 from the free throw line, that's what tells me this was just a day when, and having watched the game and seeing the quality of the looks they were getting, it was just kind of a day where some of those outside shots that normally fall don't fall. And, the more three-pointers that you take, the more variance that you kind of add into the game, and you're going to have some of those, especially in road environments. So I look at that free throw number, and it helps me not be concerned about the 3-point number while just kind of explaining, what ultimately I thought was the difference. Iowa makes that big three late in the game, and Indiana missed too many opportunities throughout the game to make those. But I think that's just basketball, and you're going to have days like that throughout the course of a 30-plus game season. So, but this team came ready to play, and they came ready to win. It just, they got outshot by one at the end. So,
Zion, any numbers that jump out to you?
Yeah, I'll go back to the rebound and just the fact that Iowa only had 3 offensive rebounds, and they were able to keep Sonano off the offensive glass. She only had 2 of those 3 offensive rebounds. You look at Yarn Garzone, who I've mentioned several times, did not shoot well, but she got 14 boards, meaning she was coming over and helping out on the boards with Mackenzie Holmes. Mackenzie Holmes, I think, had 6 rebounds herself. So I look at Garzone getting those 14 boards. We talked about the balanced scoring. They've got 4 players that had 4 or more rebounds. There's a balanced rebounding effort as well by Indiana, because as explosive as this Iowa offense is, you cannot let them get second opportunities. And even without many second opportunities, they still dropped 86. So the fact that Indiana was able to keep them off the glass was an impressive feat to me.
Coach, I have one more, and I hope I don't steal. I don't want to steal the number that you might have, like last night.
You're good.
But I think, there's a couple here, and I think they're linked together. One is points off turnovers. Again, Indiana only had 8 turnovers, but Iowa turned them into 15 points. So they capitalized on those, and they won fast break points 18-7. Now, you would somewhat expect that because, as Iona said, Iowa plays faster, they push the pace. But I thought, some of the defensive miscommunications that we've talked about, a lot of that I thought happened in transition. I didn't think we did a very good job today of locating shooters in transition, and that, led to a few open threes that Iowa was able to make. And so, that gap there in the transition and the fast break points, which you would expect somewhat, I thought some of that was preventable if Indiana had just played better transition defense.
Yeah, and I want to go back to kind of your comment about the fact that they competed all day long, and also Zion's number about the rebounding. We won the rebound. If you're not competing, you're getting pounded by Iowa on the glass because they're a physical team. They only had 8 turnovers, as well. We only had 8 turnovers. In a game where you're not competing, a game where you're lackadaisical, you're turning it over 15, 17, 20 times. We didn't do that. It just ended up being one of those games that we had the numbers in some cases were maybe in favor of us, or we were even there, and the game's even. We just got beat on a shot by a really good player who, again, we can have the discussion about whether or not you miss a free throw or whether you should have done something differently on the play that Clark caught the ball and scored. But for 39 minutes or realistically 40 minutes, this team battled, it competed, it didn't get run out of a very hostile environment. Kathy was at the game. She was texting with us a little bit in the chat or in the text message group that it was really, really loud and kind of maybe the loudest place she had been, at least in a long time. And so, and they competed, and that's what you want to see in a situation like that. And it really, in my opinion, bodes well for us to go deeper as we go deeper into the tournament, because there's going to be games like this. You're going to have a tough game in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, hopefully a Final Four matchup. And how, hopefully we respond in the same way we did today by competing, but just make a couple more plays. That difference between winning and losing is really small. But in today, it just happened to be Iowa on the other side of that advantage, not us. It's
also interesting, Indiana fans have watched 2 just outstanding basketball games in the last 2 days. Yesterday, Purdue out-rebounded Indiana by 17. Today, Indiana out-rebounded Iowa by 8. The team that won the rebounding battle lost both times. And it's a good reminder that rebounding margin is probably one of the most overrated stats in basketball. it doesn't often tell you the story that you think it's telling you. Now, that doesn't mean that rebounding isn't important. Rebounding is important, but you can't always look just at the rebounding margin and think that that's going to be predictive of the actual result. And these last 2 games have been a really good reminder of that reality.
Yeah, so let's move on here real quick while we got Jared with us, and we'll go on into getting ready for our game ball. And
I love all the musical touches.
We'll try it. The music from Bob Thompson, we want to thank him for all that as well. So, all right, so let's move on into the game ball here. And the game ball right now has kind of been the Mackenzie Holmes Award here. She leads us with 15. So, but let's go around the horn. Jared, I'll start with you, and then we'll go Zion, and then we'll go the reverse order on the Hustle Award.
Oh, man, I was really kind of debating a few things. I think ultimately I've got to give it to Mackenzie Holmes. She led Indiana in scoring. Again, she was remarkably efficient. I thought played, very good defense down low. I really thought we haven't talked a lot about the officiating, which I think is fine because Indiana got some calls and Iowa got some calls. The place where it stood out to me that I thought the game was really not officiated well was in the post, where I thought it was really inconsistent on the 2 sides. I thought Cesano got away with a lot of using her off arm to push off, and some fouls that went on Mackenzie Holmes that you look at it and it's like, how's that a foul on her? And so I thought she was able to battle through that, not let it affect her, to lead Indiana in scoring. And then to make those 2 free throws, I mean, those are tough free throws, pressure-filled free throws in a tough environment. And she's just been terrific all season long and was great again today. My only wish is that, maybe she could have gotten, a few more looks because, I mean, there's nothing more efficient in women's college basketball, basically, than a Mackenzie Holmes post touch. So if Indiana could have found a way to get her a few more, maybe they have a bigger lead there at the end. But she was tremendous, showed a lot of mental toughness, and so she gets my game ball.
Zion, we'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, I think I'll give my game ball to Grace Berger. And the reason I say that, her final stat line, 16 points and 8 assists. But to me, I say this because she made the shots in the first quarter that kept Indiana from getting blown out. There were multiple times in that first quarter where Iowa makes a 3 or makes a shot, and I'm just in there like, this – the crowd's into it. Like, this could get ugly really quickly. And Berger came down a couple of times and made shots that Indiana really needed in that first quarter of play. So I'm going to give mine to Grace Berger. She had 6 points in that first quarter, 10 points in the first half. And once again, she finished with 16 and 8. Without her, this game would have gotten ugly quick. It would have been probably a 15-point lead for Iowa after the first quarter of play. And it wasn't that because she made shots. She kind of settled the rest of the team down. There was a moment on the broadcast where Rebecca Lobo, where I think it was in the second quarter where Indiana was giving up a run, and Rebecca Lobo was like, they need Grace Berger back in the game immediately. And Grace Berger came back in the game, and they get to halftime, and they're only down by 1. So it just felt like time after time, Grace Berger settled the team down when they needed it, and they were in position to win up until the last second.
Good point.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Grace Berger here as well, just because I felt like that she was doing Grace Berger things, all the things. And again, I know we point out that the surprise that she turned it over and missed a shot, but she was doing Grace Berger things, and especially, like Zion said, and as Jared said earlier, she's one of the best pocket passers you've seen in a long time, whether male or female. Just does a wonderful job with the pocket pass. And I thought she was doing that again today. She got to her spots there in the second half as well. I thought Zion, especially even in the third quarter, when Iowa started to make a little move there after the halftime, she got down and got into the post and was able to move and get a couple shots that went in for as well. So I'm going to go with Grace Berger here. But again, we could have had about 2 or 3 people we could have talked about here in terms of the game ball. But we're going to give Grace Berger the game ball here for her performance at Iowa, and also 4 rebounds. I was also going to point out she did have 4 rebounds, so she was being active on the glass. Let's move around here.
Wait, you guys want to hear my NIL idea? Here's my NIL idea for the offseason. Pay-per-view, Grace Berger versus Jalen Hood-Schifino, game of horse, only mid-range shots. It would take forever to finish.
Is this paying for Jalen to come back next year? Is that how they're going to fund it?
Or just give him some money out the door on his way to the NBA? But who you got? Who would your money be on in that? Because I think I'm going with Grace. I love Fino, but I think I'm going with Grace.
I'm going with Grace. Since I'm on the Doing the Work show, I'm going to go with Grace here. And since I hosted co-hosted the Grace Burger show, I better go with Grace.
They're incredible players. I mean, I really, it's one of those things, like, really cherish watching the two of them play basketball, because we're not, I mean, we may get someone like them in the future, but they play such unique games in the modern style of college basketball with where their bread and butter is as scorers, and they really, especially a lot of us who are, want to see, maybe, Indiana, kind of focus their offense, in a little bit of a different way that's kind of more 3-point focused and all this stuff. And I think there's obviously valid arguments for that, but you have to set that aside when you have two players like them that are so good at the mid-range, and it's a real skill because those are the shots that modern defenses give up. And so it's just so much fun to watch them play. It's an old school style, but they're so good at it. And who knows? I mean, it may be a while before we have, one, let alone two players who are so proficient on those shots.
Yeah, so let's move on to the Hustle Award here. And I totally agree with you, Jared, that's kind of the lost art of the game. But let's go on to the Hustle Award here. And Zion, we'll let you go first on the Hustle Award.
Yeah, I have a feeling we might all three say this player, maybe not, but I'm going to go with Sydney Parrish. Once again, similar to Grace almost, where she hit those shots that were needed, but she just made the plays on both ends that were necessary, and her energy has changed this team so much. This team has been good for a few years, but I honestly feel like she's added something else, or I guess maybe even picked up kind of the type of energy Nicole Cardano-Hillary left off from this program. We're just like, you need that, like pit bull type of player that just loves to hustle and just loves to get down on the ground and make plays. She also made multiple threes that came up big for IU today. So I'm giving mine to Sydney Parrish today. She had herself quite the game, especially in the second half. It felt like she was everywhere in the second half making plays.
Jared?
Yeah, Sydney is definitely a great choice. She was my first instinct. I think you can make a case for Grace. I think you can make a case for Yarden with the work that she did on the glass. But I'm giving mine to Chloe, who had the unenviable task of having to chase Caitlin Clark around for a lot of the day, and got into some uncharacteristic foul trouble, but I thought really played really well defensively the last few minutes when she was in foul trouble. When she came back in after those 4 fouls, I thought she did a really good job of just not letting Caitlin Clark get anything easy. And I know, she was able to get that last shot. But having that task on defense, but then also, the role that she plays offensively, where sometimes she's the primary ball handler. Then when Grace is out, she's or when Grace is in there, more of a secondary ball handler. But I thought she, really on several occasions was really committed to getting the ball into the lane and driving and not just settling for shots. And so, outside shots. So I was really impressed with her two-way effort all day long. And I'm sure, she probably look at it and say, well, Caitlin scored 30 points and we lost. And so how good was it? But I mean, she's just become such a huge piece for this team on both ends of the court, because she just does so many different things, that when she's not out there, it's really noticeable because, you don't have her just all over the court making plays. So I thought she played really hard on both ends tonight.
Yeah, I thought Sydney was really good in the second half. I think she had 16 of her 18 in the second half. But I'm going to go Chloe as well. What really jumped out to me when I started looking at the stat sheets, I thought it was kind of a quiet 18. I know she hit some shots, but I didn't think she had 18. I would have said she was in double figures, but she ended up with 18. She had 3 rebounds. She had 3 assists, and she didn't commit a turnover. Now, as you said, she got in a little bit of foul trouble, but like we've all said, she had the unenviable task of chasing Caitlin Clark around for the majority of the game. And I thought did a decent job. I just thought that she got a little foul trouble. And as you mentioned earlier, Jared, I think some of that also came when we got miscommunications, some cross matches in transition and stuff. But I thought Chloe did a heck of a job as much as she could one-on-one with Caitlin Clark on defense. So I'm going to go with Caitlin Clark with the hustle. She'll get our hustle award for the Iowa game.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought the defense on Caitlin Clark was pretty good. I mean, that's just how good Caitlin Clark is. She can, you can defend her relatively well, and she scores, 34 points, gets 9 assists. To me, the issue is, that Kate Martin scored 19 points, and, Marshall hit a couple of those threes in the second half where she was wide open. Those, to me, are more kind of the shots and the plays that you don't want to allow happen But as far as Clark goes, I mean, she was only 4 for 12 from three, kind of forced her into, kind of chucking up some shots, that weren't great shots. But I thought overall their game plan there and Chloe's efforts there did a pretty good job. The defensive issues more to me were just some of the the issues on the back end and that led to some wide open threes that we've talked about.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I just think that Clark was a little more efficient today than she was in Bloomington. Whereas in Bloomington, she had to get 28 shots, I think, to get her 35, 34 points. And today she got 34 points on 22 shots. So she was a little more efficient with the ball. Excuse me, a little more efficient shooting. And she should be in her gym. And also that's the advantage of playing at home. So, all right. So let's move on. Any lingering questions that we have about, and again, this is when you're 26-2, I think is going to be, a little bit of like, really, we're talking about lingering questions. But Jared, anything coming out of the game today that gives you pause, maybe not concern, but pause?
No, because we are not going to have to play any more games in a top 10 team's home gym, which, was a big part of this. I don't have, my only lingering question is, when's this team playing again? Let's go. Let's get back out on the court and play. I think it would have been great to punctuate the outright Big Ten title with shoving it in ESPN's face and shoving it in Iowa's face, which we all wanted, which is why that last shot going in was so nauseating. That would have been great and satisfying, but would it really have meant anything in the grand scheme of things? Not really, because I don't think it's going to knock Indiana's seed down. I mean, you guys might know better than me. I mean, maybe does this make Indiana the 3rd overall seed or 4th overall seed? But they're still going to be a number 1 seed. They're the outright champions and one of the toughest Big Tens that we've ever seen in women's basketball. So I don't have any lingering questions because I just trust this team too much to think that anything from this game is going to linger. As I saw a Chronic Hoosier tweet, the only thing it may do is it may piss them off, and I don't think anybody wants to see this team, pissed off and have even an extra level of edge. So no, I have no lingering questions in terms of concerns. I just want to see, who do we play, and then, what are the matchups and what does the road end up looking like in the NCAA tournament? Because that's the most important lingering question right now. This team has done so much work throughout the season to put itself in a great position come tournament time. And, the Big Ten tournament is great, and I hope we go win the Big Ten tournament. I think that would be a great punctuation on a great Big Ten season. But I think everybody is now looking – the NCAA tournament is the big prize. And this team has knocked on the door, and can they actually bust it through? I certainly believe in them. And so, that the next big lingering question that's really meaningful to me, what's the NCAA tournament draw? Because that's ultimately what's going to really impact the biggest kind of remaining question for what this team can accomplish.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I don't think actually I'll answer part of your question first. I don't think it affects our seeding. I think we would stay at the number 2 seed. You lost by 1 on the road at a top 5, top 6 team. I don't think your seeding is going to get affected just because some of the other teams have been losing. Stanford lost yesterday. I don't think LSU's resume jumps them ahead at this point. So that would be my opinion about that. So, but Zion, anything for you that's a pause or lingering question here?
No, I'm the same way with Jared. I don't think anything concerns me all that much about this team. As long as they can just move on from it, I'm sure right now they're probably finished up the press conference, packing up, getting ready to come back to Bloomington. As long as they can just say, hey, we lost by 1 against the number 6 team in the country, that's not something to be ashamed about. As long as they don't let the emotional part of this game linger. I don't feel like this team is one that I come away with big glaring concerns about after this ball game. I just don't see it that way. Like you said, there's no way they shouldn't stay as a 1 seed. I'm intrigued to see the AP poll tomorrow. I think they should stay number 2 overall in the AP poll. I'm not sure if they will or not, but they'll stay as a 1 seed really as long as they can win 1 game in the Big Ten tournament. As long as they don't get upset on Friday, they'll be a 1 seed come NCAA tournament time. And they have a chance. This team is probably rooting for Iowa this week. I think they want to see Iowa again next Sunday if that draws out that way. If Indiana makes it, if Iowa makes it, I think these 2 teams want to play again. So I like you said, I think they'll be hungry. I think they will be ready to go. And as long as they don't let this linger, they should be fine.
I'll bring us to what's next. Jared asked, and we're going to answer for you, Jared. The next game for IU will be on Friday. They will play. They have the double bye. They will play at 12:30 Eastern time, 11:30 Central on Friday, March 3rd. Their opponent will be either Michigan State or Nebraska. Obviously, we won't know until Thursday who they'll be playing on Friday, but that game will air on BTN. And IU's only other loss was to Michigan State in East Lansing, 83-78. We defeated Nebraska in Bloomington, 74-62. And here's the rest of the schedule. So you all will be, I've seen some people in the Workaholics chatting about this. Semifinal on Saturday would be 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central. That game would also be on BTN. And then, Jared, I know you'll enjoy this. The championship game on Sunday would be 5 Eastern, 4 Central on ESPN. And so can you imagine IU and Iowa on ESPN for the Big Ten championship game? I think you'll get a heavy dose of Caitlin Clark again, unfortunately.
I just found myself all second half being so thankful that this conference is not going to be broadcast by ESPN anymore. Seriously, a once great network that just ruins everything now, the way they cover stuff.
So we don't really have too much more preview for our next, what's coming up next, but I will say this, we will have a live show. Well, I should say we will be live. Kathy and I will be live with Doing the Work on Friday at 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central. Work schedules are getting into us a little bit, so that'll be a little bit after the game's over, but 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central. Kathy and I will have a kind of abbreviated Doing the Work post-game show. I may have a radio game here as boys sectional week is getting started here in Indiana. So I may have some radio responsibilities on Friday night as well. You also can follow us on Twitter at Doing the Work. Just search Doing the Work on Twitter and you should find us. We've been keeping our fans updated on our alumni playing overseas on our Twitter page and in the Assembly Call page. You can follow us at or check out the Assembly Call as well. You can join right now there's a free trial program going on with Assembly Call. So that's join.assemblycall.com and you can get all that fine stuff there as well. Be sure to catch or subscribe to the next episode of Crimson Cast, part of our Back Home Network family. And also Assembly Call will be on Tuesday after the men play Iowa on Tuesday with their post-game show. That game tips, I believe, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. So it'll be a late Assembly Call show. Or no, the Assembly Call show will be 9 Eastern, 8 Central. I think I had that with as well. I don't think I had the tip time right on that. So, but Jared, what time? I'm messing up the time there. What time for the Assembly Call post-game
the
show?
Iowa game's at 7 Eastern, I believe. So we'll be right after that.
So yeah,
around 9 Eastern.
That's what I had. I had the show will be about 9 Eastern, 8 Central. That's what I had typed up here, and I knew that wasn't right. I knew the game was a little earlier than that. Real quick, we'll throw it around here for last call, and Zion, we'll let you go first on last call since you've been our special guest today.
I just want to stress and emphasize that Iowa's a really good team, offensively specifically, and that their offense was incredible today. I know we spent a lot of time talking about, Indiana has some struggles in transition, and they let some other players besides Clark go off, which ended up being the issue. But there's a reason this Iowa team is number 6 in the country, and it's because their offense, for the most part, breaks down just about every team it plays. And that's what happened again tonight. They were able to dish out the shooters. They were able to get out in transition. And just in general, they had a tremendous game from multiple players. Of course, Kate Martin is the one that stands out, that finished with 19 and 4 assists for Kate Martin. She was all over the place. Sonano had 13, which is honestly less than she's had most games this year and last year. Mackenzie Holmes, after kind of getting beat by Sonano a couple times last year, she's fully healthy now, and she's played her much better in the 2 matchups we've seen this year. But this Iowa offense is incredible, and Indiana should not be hanging their heads because they lost to this team or because they gave up 86 points to them.
Yeah. Jared, last call.
Yeah, well said, Zion. I love this IU basketball team. As I've said many times, it's one of my favorite Indiana basketball teams that I've ever been able to watch. And I think in today's game, we saw a lot of the reasons why, and so even though it ended in a loss, I still walk away feeling just as confident in this group and their ability to do big things in the tournament. So just looking forward to seeing how they regroup and how they come out in the Big Ten tournament, and I expect to see a lot of great performances like we've seen. The last thing that I will say is I'm sick and tired of Iowa. I'm sick and tired of Fran McCaffrey staring down officials and then getting rewarded by an epic comeback. I'm sick and tired of flopping, being rewarded, and then being able to make last-second shots. So let's go take care of Iowa on Tuesday on the men's side because I'm just getting tired of them. But for Terry Morin's team, it feels like everything is possible for this group. And it's felt like that for a long time. And we all would have liked to, again, win this game. And I think, maybe if Indiana hadn't clinched the Big Ten already and now you lose this game and maybe you're sharing it with Iowa, now there's more kind of lingering disappointment. But Indiana still walks out of there. Have your little celebration, Iowa. We won the outright Big Ten championship. And this team just has the confidence and the swagger, but also, the humility and the togetherness, to go achieve a lot of things moving forward. So nothing I saw today dissuades me from my belief in that. And I think they'll be just fine and have a great performance in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that as well. I think from a coaching perspective, they probably have a checklist somewhere that they've kept in the locker room, coach's office. I'm sure the players they've talked with the players about it. Checklist number 1, win the Big Ten title. Check, did that. The rest of their goals are still in front of them. And I think Jared made a great point. Zion's made great points today that this is a veteran team, a mature team. They realize that their next check mark is coming up this week. Big Ten tournament title. IU women have never won the Big Ten tournament title. Of course, neither the men, but that's a whole other story. But the IU women never won. Oh, I take it back. My fault. We did win a Big Ten tournament title back in like 2002. So I have to. I
believe it's 01. Yeah.
01. So but it's been over 20 years since we won a Big Ten title. Thank you, Big Ten tournament title. Thank you, Zion. So check that off and then go into the NCAA tournament. I think that's also kind of where we are as fan bases. We're kind of ready for. Let's go see. We know where we are in the Big Ten. We're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the Big Ten. And let's go find out where we are nationally. Let's go play and let's put the shoes on and get ready to go play some of these better teams that we keep hearing about. South Carolina, LSU, and so on and so on. So, but yeah, I don't think there's any negatives coming out of this. I think this team is mature enough and better enough. They're gonna get locked in this week, and I think we're going to see a really good IU basketball team at the Big Ten tournament in Minneapolis this week. So, you guys got anything else you want to add real quick before we sign off out of here?
Just excited to see him play again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm just excited, both in the women's and men's game, get to this point of the year where everything is so hostile and intense. I'm excited to see it continue to unravel. Yeah.
So if you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assembly call. You can be a part of our private community, as I mentioned earlier. Join for free. We have a trial period going on right now at assemblycall.com/community. And special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our new logos. And thanks also to Bob Thompson for our new music that you've heard throughout the broadcast. I want to thank Zion Brown for coming on, being a guest with us the first time. I want to thank Jared Morris for coming on and joining us. His first time, I think, this year that he's joined us on doing the work.
Yeah, glad it worked out.
And thank all of you for listening. Those of you in the Workaholics today again, those of you who listen on wherever you get your podcast. And we'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Friday afternoon. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I forgot. Kathy Bennett's team won that Big Ten tournament title like in 02, I think it was. Now that I'm thinking about it, but 01 or 02. But yeah, I almost slipped up there.
Yep. So, that is okay.
Hey, I'll let you guys go and get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'll get this uploaded to Ari, and I want to thank you guys for helping me out today.
Cool.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Coach.
Thank you, guys.
Good to have you on,
Thanks,
Zion.
guys.
Let's do it again, man.
Zion. Yep, Zion. Great to have you. Now that I got your Twitter and stuff, I'll be able to get a hold of you.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, Zion.
See you
Jared,
guys.
thanks. We'll see you.